Hey guys, real quick, before we get into episode 76 with Jennifer George, I just want to have a quick chat with you and say thank you. Thank you for the constant support on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you for the support on the podcast, reaching out to us, giving us feedback on the episodes, what you liked, what you want to see more of. It really does mean a lot to us, and it keeps pushing us to put out the best content possible for you guys. With that being said, we wanted to continue with reading 5-star reviews that we've gotten on our iTunes. So this week we're going to read a review from our boy Sarush. Sarush said, if you're looking for a solid podcast with a ton of great conversations hosted by two unreal clinicians, he's a bit biased maybe, and individuals in the physiotherapy industry, then look no further. Make sure to tune to the PT Coffee Cast for an entertaining listen packed with valuable lessons and thinking points. These guys are doing an unreal job, and the episodes just keep getting better and better. Suresh, man, thank you so much for that positive feedback. It means the world to us to hear from you. We also, love what you're doing with the PT Business Corner and all your business endeavors. So thanks, man. We appreciate it. Guys, if you want to leave us a 5-star review, head over to iTunes, subscribe to the PT Coffee Cast, drop us a review, and we're going to start reading at least one review on each of our interview episodes just to show you guys a little love, because we do read the reviews and we really do appreciate the positive feedback or the negative feedback, whatever you guys have to say. We always want to get better. If you aren't following us, head over to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow us at the MVMT PTs. If you want to reach us on email, you can reach us at themovementpts@gmail.com. And if you want to get yourself a bag of the original blend because you want that good coffee, head over to themovementpts.com, get yourself a bag, and I highly suggest you start brewing your coffee in an AeroPress. It's the best way to make your coffee. Me and Will both love it. Try it out. Let us know what you think. So enough of me. Enjoy this episode with Jennifer George on communication is care. Also, make sure you're sipping some coffee because that's most important. All right, guys. Cheers. Welcome to the Movement PT Coffee Cast, where we sit down and talk about physical therapy, health, and whatever else comes to mind during our coffee-infused conversations. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Movement PT Coffee Cast. My name's Dalton, and with me, as always, is my beautifully bearded friend, William. William, how are we doing today?
Doing really good, Dalton, because, we're here together.
Can we just cheers, man? I haven't seen you in a while. Cheers. We'll sip the coffee.
Yeah, it's not often that we're kind of, hanging out, able to do the podcast like this, which is cool. I think.
In person, yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel good. I feel ready to go. Okay, let's get into it. Today we have a wonderful guest. She's a physiotherapist from the Windsor, Ontario area. Her name's Jennifer George. She's also an author, and she has a big passion for communication and connection, and we're excited to have her on today. Jennifer, welcome.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here and connect with you both today.
And you guys have kind of an unspoken sort of
connection.
Thing.
Yeah. We're from the same general area, like the Windsor area.
That
area, you naturally just know that we're great people. That's right.
Yeah, just inevitably. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. Jen, before we
I started following you guys on Instagram a short while ago.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we get into it, why don't you just start off, give our listeners just a little bit of background, on who you are and maybe what you've been doing over the last little couple of years and where you are now.
Yeah, so I've been practicing as a physio since 2007, but in the last 5+ years, I've found my home on inpatient rehab at Hotel Dieu Hospital. So I work on a general rehab unit there. I'm also a published author as of late. So my book just released, Communication is Care, in June of this year. But I was also a caregiver to my dad on the onset of my career as a physiotherapist in 2007. So my life as a caregiver and as a physio started to kind of parallel each other. So that's how this book kind of evolved as well. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Yeah, I binge read your book this week.
It's a quick read.
Yeah, but it was really good. I really appreciated the 9 strategies that you gave and just a lot of the stories that you told with examples from your career as a physio as well as you being a caregiver for your dad. So I really appreciated that. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the book, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about you and like your journey. I noticed like scrolling through your Instagram page, like fitness is a big thing that you like. So can you talk a little bit about that and why it's such like a priority in your life?
Yeah. So when I grew up, like growing up, I was always very active, very athletic. I was a bit of a tomboy. So physical activity has always been a source of play for me too. Getting into high school, I had a bit of a hormonal change, and to be honest, I'm only 5'3", and I was 5'3" then. And I remember seeing the scale, and it was, it's tipping at 189.9, and I had a revelation that, I was going to be 200 pounds. And I decided to kind of take control of my health and make better decisions. And so from that standpoint, over the years, it kind of started with weight and body image in a sense, but also health, because I knew my health was detrimental at that point. But in most recent years, especially practicing as a physio and writing my book, physical fitness is more of a deep appreciation now. So it sustains me because I'm grateful for my body, and I'm grateful for how it can move on command, and I'm grateful for its resiliency and for its ability to keep me independent and self-sufficient and happy. So that's what has kept me grounded in physical fitness, and that's why I have a deep passion for it. Yeah, so it's evolved over the years for sure. Yeah.
And you said, so you've obviously like made a little bit of a career shift in the last like 5 or so years?
Yeah, so into inpatient rehab. Yeah, so I've always been, so I first started in like orthopedics mainly, and then went into long-term care, but I've always had a progressive approach to treatment, and that didn't always fit the model I was in or the framework I was working in among staff and stuff. So I had to kind of create my own space with that, and I had to take a chance on a position on inpatient rehab, and found that this is exactly, what aligns with my integrity as a professional, which is that progressive approach to health and restoring wellness and independence again. So yeah, and that kind of aligned with my own health and well-being, right? So
yeah, I think we can get on board with that.
Yeah,
for sure.
What led you towards, like, obviously your book's titled Communication is Care, like what led you down the route of like seeing how important communication is, and why you kind of wanted to push that message more through your book?
Yeah, so getting into physio itself as a career, communication isn't the reason why most people probably get into physiotherapy, right? We get into physio because we have an innate desire to help people, or we have a fascination with the science of the human body and how to optimize wellness with it. But that's what started me in physio, of course. But then being a caregiver to my dad, and that happening at the same time, I saw and felt and experienced firsthand the impact of positive and negative communicated interactions with healthcare providers. And I saw that the impact that had on my dad's healing and his demeanor, as well as our outlook as caregivers. So then I started to realize that there was a bit of a communication gap and how that impacted healing. And, I reflected on why communication couldn't always be positive, right? Despite dealing with people with pain and impairments and barriers, why couldn't we still speak about it in a positive way so that they felt comfortable in our care, right? So that's kind of what led to its importance. And then currently, I always reflect on my patient outcomes. And, I can have 2 patients with the same impairments, similar treatment approaches, and oftentimes it comes down to rapport in terms of meaningful outcomes. So, yeah, that's.
I think that you kind of like came to that through your personal experience, because I know like recently having gone in a situation with like family members where they're interacting with healthcare providers, you realize the impacts of poor communication, and kind of like that, you shouldn't maybe assume that like what you're saying is being perceived correctly.
Right, exactly. And, the importance of engaging patients and families and telling them that or encouraging them, I should say, to be a partner in their care, right, from the onset of it, rather than, I'm just going to assess you and I'm going to do treatment on you and all this stuff, right, doing to somebody rather than doing with, and having them guide us. So that's kind of how my practice has evolved. Just reframing the way I say things and making patients self-aware of their role and their importance and value in their care. So,
do you find that happens gradually over time, or is that like an overt discussion you have with your clients on day one?
I find it happens, sometimes it happens on the onset. It just depends at the pace of the person I'm working with. I've had people that have been very disengaged in my care, and I'll say to them, you know, you seem, I use the word engaged. I'll say, like, I feel like I'm kind of pulling you in. You know, do you feel engaged in your care? And sometimes they don't. And the reason has oftentimes nothing to do with me, right? It has nothing to do with physio. It has to do with something greater that's on their mind, that's taking priority and importance. And so I give them that space, right? And I reapproach at a later time, or I let them know that I'm here. And oftentimes patients will, you don't realize the impact that that has until you see them later again. And they surprise you. They kind of show up and say, you know, that really meant a lot to me, or I'm ready now, or, you know, yeah, they have more of an openness, I guess you can say, to your care. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think just as physios, we have this like natural, I don't know, predisposition towards like wanting to be a hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Wanting to save lives. Yeah. Totally. And it's not about us, right? And that's what we have to realize, is that we might know what's right for them clinically, but patients have to receive that, right? They have to be open and allow you to give them that treatment approach. And you have to do it in such a way that makes them feel like they're a part of it too, right? And that's a hard thing to do. Communication is very challenging. It's,
yes.
You know, it's always been considered a bird course for people in, you know, school, right? But it's really not. It's probably one of the hardest things we have to do around the care that we give. So,
for sure. Yeah. I really liked how you started off your book with like talking about defining and like aligning your purpose.
Yeah.
I guess, how would you go about defining your purpose, and then how has that like developed over time, or has it developed over time?
It has. I mean, my purpose as a physio has always been to help people, for sure. But in terms of kind of walking through what I do every day, I always reflect. I always take inventory of what I need. So whether it's a health-related issue, whether it's a relationship-related issue, financial, I basically make that a priority. Physical fitness, like we just talked about, is considered a bit of play for me, but it's also considered a fundamental for me and a part of who I am. So that's considered a non-negotiable as well, and something I do every day almost. And then I always find gratitude. So gratitude's a big thing for me. I wake up with it, I go to bed with it, and I literally spew words of gratitude during my day, especially when times are pretty stressful. And I've found that over time that leads to growth for myself personally and professionally. When I first started practicing, though, again, I got into the profession to help people. But now, as I've evolved as a professional too, and as a person, I've gone beyond, and that's why I wrote this book, I've gone beyond the direct impact that I can have on my 10 patients, right? And now it's like, okay, I've written this book, and maybe something that I've helped, you know, Dalton with, like enlightened you with, will now help your patient. So my impact, I'm hoping, will become more of a mass effect, right? Rather than just my direct effect that I can have on the 10 patients I have right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we're in a time where you have the ability to do that through so many different mediums. And it's amazing that we can do that if you're putting out positive information and positive things into the spaces. It's great.
Yeah, and networking with like-minded professionals and doing that is awesome. Yeah.
Another thing you're talking about is like, it kind of goes with what you just said, maybe like satisfying your own needs as like a person. And like you named a couple things, like obviously exercising is a big part of your life and a way of play, like giving gratitude. How would you give people advice on trying to satisfy those needs in their own life? I know it's a tough question because it's obviously very individual to the person, but maybe through your own examples of how you did it. Because I know for me personally, it gets challenging, like just with, you know, work and all these other things, to try to find that time to satisfy your own needs. But I've recently started to realize how important that is for myself as like a human, and to like then be able to go out and do the job the way that I want to be able to do it. So
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
talk a little about that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So for me, especially, I always think about, again, I'm big on reflection, and that's in the book, because I think the only way to know what you need is to reflect on where you're at. And so, for example, just recently launching my book, there was a big media frenzy around it, right? So for 2 weeks straight, I was like a zombie in a way, because I was waking up early to do interviews, and I was rehearsing and things like that. I've never been in the media, so it was such a big learning curve for me, right? In meeting so many different people and adapting to different people in different situations, plus having to work full time, and plus trying to stay committed to my own personal health and well-being. So sometimes I've encouraged people to literally like write things down in an agenda. So if it's gotten so chaotic and so busy, for example, if physical fitness is something you enjoy, put that in your calendar. Don't just assume it's something you're going to do. For my fellow clinicians, I know a lot of people who work through their lunch hour, for example. I actually tell them to, so if you're an outpatient clinician and you set your own schedule, maybe online or whatnot, to literally put your lunch hour in to your schedule. And that's what's going to make you stop for a moment and give some time to that, because you need your downtime too. So I'm a bit of an introvert too. So prioritizing my time for myself is very important. So I don't hesitate to say no to things that don't serve me, and in turn will serve my patients. So yeah, being committed to your own needs is very important, and staying true to that. It's very easy to get pulled, because you guys are putting more content out there, right? So for example, so people are going to want to pull at you in many different directions, but how do you stay true to your intention of this podcast and what you guys are trying to do in the greater overall picture, right? And always coming back to that.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is like understanding yourself a little bit, so you know what refuels your tank and
Exactly.
what you need to keep it full.
Exactly. And
hold.
Right. And what rejuvenates you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're working and it's not refueling you in a way because you've had a great day, or you've had a great situation happen and it drains you, then that's a problem, right? And it deserves more reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely comes back to maybe that first point too, of like defining like your purpose and and maybe even your values as a person, and like what you want in your daily life, so that if you know what those things are, then you're going to be like, okay, like I'm going to make sure I do these things, or I might say no to this because it doesn't align with what I want, or it's not going to get me towards those things, so I'm going to say no to that.
Right. And be unapologetic about it, right?
Yeah, and that's something that I think everyone struggles with, but like I've definitely struggled with that over the last little while too, is just like saying no to things that might take your energy away from other things that you're actually trying to get to.
Right. Yeah. And and I think that comes with time and self-awareness. And, sometimes we think we want something, and then when it comes, it's like, okay, and now it becomes so much more. And yeah, how do you stay true to that initial intention and purpose, right? And stay grounded in that.
Yeah. Compassion and empathy, those are big buzzwords, I feel like, in the physiotherapy world right now, for a good reason, obviously. But could you kind of break down maybe how you demonstrate like some compassion and empathy throughout your care, and like kind of define what that means?
For sure. If I could share a story, maybe that would highlight this well, because this is just something that recently happened. So in my clinical space, usually we're treating about 2 patients an hour instead of, more of an outpatient setting, which might be more. So one patient was getting ready to participate in care. So we were having her set up in the parallel bars, and she needs that one-to-one attention. But another patient came through in her wheelchair, and she looked kind of down, not her usual demeanor. And in fact, one of the other staff members noticed that about her and kind of casually said, "Oh, you look kind of down today." And she didn't respond. And then finally, when we found our position by the mat, I sat down next to her on a stool, and I got her attention. And I said, "Are you sad today?" And she actually said she was. She said, "Yes, I am sad today." So I had this other patient who was getting ready to participate, right? But this patient needed my attention in this moment, right? Because she was not her usual self. Something was blocking her, and she looked very concerned and fearful. So I asked her if she would tell me what was going on, and she felt comfortable doing so. And she had a deep fear about going home. And what it was related to was the stairs. So she felt comfortable enough to share that with me. And although we had been working towards that in the parallel bars, for example, we hadn't actually gone to a staircase yet, but that was something we were working towards. So I asked her if she would be open to trying it today, just to desensitize the fear. Validated her fears, of course, first, told her it was very realistic to feel that way. Brought her to the staircase, and I said, just do the first step if you can. And then you can even come backwards, back down. You don't have to keep going all the way up if you're not comfortable. Sure enough, she did it, and she just kept going. She kind of just ran with it. And then she was so surprised by how well she did that it totally helped her, right? And the purpose of having empathy in that moment was I was able to give her a treatment approach that meant something to her. And that's what empathy really means. It's understanding the emotional driver, trying to understand it, and then trying to unlock your patient's potential by giving them an intervention that means something to them, right? So after that point, we never had that concern again. And instead of fear, she became more driven to master that task. And the other patient who was waiting for me did not complain. She didn't complain that I was spending more time with another patient. She sympathized, probably, if anything. And so I think as physios and as healthcare professionals, we need to, again, make it about our patients. Patients will understand that you would do the same for them. You would take that same amount of time for them if they needed it. Yeah.
And
so
with empathy, is there a point where it can become too much?
I think it could. I kind of touched on that in the book, and that was kind of my own self-awareness, right? I think it's possible to be too much of anything. I think it's important to have that cognitive awareness that you can understand what your patients are going through, but it's one thing to understand it, and it's one thing to take it on. And so I think if you take on that painful experience of what they're going through, then it can obliterate, or it can kind of make you fatigued, burnt out, but it can also impair judgment. So carrying on from that same story, if that patient continued to